A handful of students have had their visas revoked. Let's talk to my next guest. Susham M is on the James Show. And tell me a little bit more about this. Who all has lost their student visas, and what was the pretext for it, Susham?
Yeah, it's an honor to be here. Thanks for having me. Actually, a lot of individuals have had this. We've had a lot of consultations about it. AILA, American Immigration Lawyers Association, has estimated that about over 4,500 students have had their status terminated. And this is a big deal. This is unprecedented. You know, I've practiced almost 15 years immigration law, and there's a distinction between the visa, like a student visa, which could be revoked. That's mostly for traveling, and the actual status itself being terminated with like no notice, no deportation proceedings or anything. It's just terminated in a
So what's
program
that one
called
called? There's the
SEVIS.
one student visa for traveling, I guess if you wanted to come here and just visit and take some pictures and leave, and then versus actually going to school here. Do I have that right?
Not exactly. So for coming here, that's a visitor visa. And for studying, it would be a student visa, but that's like outside the US coming in. What we have going on now is people that have been approved student visas, like students here going to school, and then without any notice, like no immigration court hearings, or anything, no notice at all, no real due process. They just get alerted from their school that their status has been terminated on an online program called SEVIS. And we're getting a lot of these calls. And like I said, it's unprecedented. It hasn't really been done like this before. The visa could be revoked, but not the status. The status itself, you usually get a chance to an opportunity to respond, due process, court hearings, things like that.
So what's the difference between the visa and the status?
Visa is really used for travel. The status is when you're already here, like you have legal status in the US. And that's what's happening is they're just waking up one day without any process or anything, and a notification from the school that their status has been terminated. It's really appalling.
So what students are having their visas revoked? Are we talking about students who have participated in protests or are part of certain groups, or do we even know?
It seems to be a broad swath of students. So, for example, we've done a bunch of consultations with individuals with incredibly minor crimes. Like they wouldn't even, the crime would not even trigger what's called a deportability ground. So they wouldn't even be put in immigration court for it. Like one example is a lady in a PhD program who had a DUI that was dismissed, not even convicted, dismissed, many years ago, 7 or 8 years ago. And now while she's in the PhD program, she's just told that her status has been terminated.
So what's happening to these students? Do they have to leave and then appeal their decision or reapply? Is there any appeals situation? I don't know what the next step is.
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So, I mean, they have a couple of different pathways. One is something called student visa reinstatement, that they could apply for with the government to get their student status reinstated. The problem with that is, one, it goes to the government, to USCIS, the immigration agency. Two, it takes a long time. Could take 6 to 9 months with all these recent issues of everybody else filing for these student visa reinstatements. You could get a huge delay on that processing time. So there's a couple of problems with it, but that's one option, is the student visa reinstatement. And the second one is a federal lawsuit. And we've seen several lawsuits already be filed. We know of one that's at least been successful with a federal judge, where their status was temporarily reinstituted by a federal judge.
Okay, I think I saw that headline. By the way, we're talking with Susham M. He's a local immigration attorney here in Texas. Was this the Dartmouth students that had the successful lawsuit? I just remember a headline. I didn't read this.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Yeah, that's exactly what happened. And the underlying basis for it, it was a motion for preliminary injunction, but the basis for it is that it was arbitrary or capricious. So kind of like we talked about, all these students are being put in together, even if they have, little or no criminal history, even if the criminal history isn't a ground for deportation proceedings, even if the criminal matter was dismissed, meaning they were never convicted. So all these individuals have just had their their status terminated. And so one of the arguments, one of the legal arguments could be, is it arbitrary the way that the government's going around doing it and without due process? So immigrants still have a right under the Fifth Amendment for due process. So there are, and that individual was successful in getting his status reinstituted. There's several other lawsuits pending across the nation. And I think there's also a class action being looked at as well.
All right. So if you're a student that had your visa revoked, what's the first thing you need to do, Modi?
Definitely they need to contact a good immigration attorney.
Do they have to go home and contact an immigration attorney, or do you recommend they stay here and try and get it done on U.S. soil?
That's a great question too. If they leave, they actually cannot file a student visa reinstatement. So they could be hurting their chances for a student visa reinstatement in that sense if they leave. The other issue is if they leave, there could be jurisdictional issues with the lawsuit, like whether they have standing and things. So the two potential chances they have here that we're currently talking about, it's likely that they're going to need to be in the United States to fight their case.
A lot of us are looking at this from the outside. Native-born folks like myself are saying, you don't participate in any of these protest movements and you actually just go to school and worry about your grades and maybe you can duck some of this criticism. Is that something you would recommend as an immigration attorney?
Well, we've done a lot of consults this week on this particular issue, and none of them actually had protests. So they weren't involved in any of the protests. Just seems to be like a broad swath. Maybe they're using an AI agent or something.
Anyone with a criminal background or violation, or do some people have completely clean records and we have no idea what it possibly could be?
I think several of them could have a criminal issue, but it was completely dismissed, or it was so minor that it doesn't even trigger deportation proceedings. So it seems to be that they're just trying to figure any trigger out. And then I've heard of other immigration attorneys that have had consults that have no criminal history. So quite inefficiently done. Almost all the consults I've had, and I've had a lot in the last week, have had criminal issues either that were not convicted, like dismissed, or the criminal issue was so minor that it wouldn't even trigger a deportation case.
Interesting. All right, Susham M, I appreciate your expertise. He's an immigration expert here in Texas, and thank you for being on the James Show.
Hey, it's my honor. Hope to have you guys to be back on it. There's a lot of news going on with immigration these days, and I hope this was informative to your audience, okay?
Yep, immigration has been coming up quite a bit lately, so thank you, Susham.